Welcome to It's a Death Sentence. Today we are joined by Louise Goode. She is a celebrant from the West Midlands and she's no ordinary celebrant. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, please, Louise?
Yes, well, you're quite right. I am a celebrant and I've been a celebrant for 9 years. I came into celebrancy, I started off life as a singer and I was singing at funerals and I saw a lot of funerals that I didn't feel were particularly reflective of the people. So when I heard about celebrancy and how it focuses on people rather than the religion or spiritual beliefs of the person, I got quite excited. So I went to train as a celebrant and I haven't looked back really. It's been a really interesting journey. I've met so many interesting people and told so many fabulous stories about people's lives, and I love the challenge of helping people to put together a service that they can look forward to. That's the best part of my job, that I can actually turn a situation round from one of dread to one of excitement and
Wonderful.
And pride as well, that they're going to be able to look back on somebody's life and really celebrate all they were, so and all they achieved. And so the clue's in the name. A celebrant celebrates life.
Yeah. Louise, I've got to ask you, singer to singer, what an interesting journey to come from singing at somebody's funeral, realising that you wanted to be part of that in a much bigger and more spectacular way. Do you still sing at people's funerals?
I do, if I'm asked.
Good, wonderful. And that could be anything, presumably, whatever the song is that person has chosen.
Well, that's right, yeah. I mean, I trained as a classical singer, so obviously things like Ave Maria and Pie Jesu are not a problem. But over the years, I've sung all kinds of things. I've sung Celtic folk songs. I've sung Whitney Houston ballads, and of course, Bette Midler, The Rose, that sort of thing. Eva Cassidy, even songs by the Kinks.
Amazing.
So, a bit of everything really.
So as well as funerals, you do weddings?
I do, yes.
And what do you prefer to do? Which is your preference, weddings or funerals, or you don't mind either?
I don't mind, actually. They've both got their benefits and rewards. Obviously, you can have a lot of fun with weddings, and if you've visited my Instagram, you might have seen me as a pirate in Crete and on the Golden Hind last year.
Wonderful.
Because I was in my element doing that, because coming from an operatic background, I'd played Carmen, so being a pirate doing a wedding was like being a pirate, a Carmen at sea, if you like, a gypsy at sea. So that was probably my perfect role, really. And most recently, I also did a Peaky Blinders wedding, which was a lot of fun. There's a lot of swearing, which again, I was in my element. So.
Feel free on this podcast. You'll be fine. We don't mind.
Did you do it in a pirate style?
Oh no, I was Peaky Blinder. It's full on Birmingham accent.
Oh, when you did the last one,
Fuck me. Couldn't do it any other way, could you?
Love that.
Absolutely brilliant. So just going back we'll come away from the weddings and back to the funerals. When it comes to being a celebrant, how do you navigate what people want, especially when they're going through such a difficult time? So you've just said to us that you make it quite unique to that person. It's important to you that it's really focused about them, whereas actually a lot of funeral services or whatever, they can be fairly generic. Should I say that? I don't know. They can be. But clearly this is not something you do. So how do you go about having those discussions with the family members and making sure?
Well, it's all about listening. It's not going in with an assumption that you know what to do and what they want. People are different, and the first thing you need to do is listen, watch and listen and think about what they're saying, and not try to box people off. And that sort of led me to do, as with the weddings, pirates and Peaky Blinders, I've been known to dress up in rock chick style, fishnet stockings and spiked up hair with horns.
You could have come dressed like that today, wouldn't you?
Yeah, guitar slung over my shoulder. This was for a young man a youngish man, he was 50, and he'd been in a rock band, and his love of rock music was really, really apparent from the start. So we did a sort of themed funeral, which involved having the Ace of Spades instead of a hymn. Everybody joined in singing the Ace of Spades, and we handed out shots of Jack Daniels so he could have a toast at the end of the reflection period. So that was a lot of fun. And then another one, I dressed up as a wizard, and this chap was really into festival music, festivals, stargazing, all things sort of weird and wonderful, wizardry, that sort of thing, and moon gazing. So there were lots of little touches with his funeral.
So really specific stuff.
Yeah, and again, I dressed up, silver cape, spiked up silver hair, and very heavy eye makeup.
My next question to you was going to be, I mean, you may have already answered this, but what is the strangest request you've ever had?
Oh, now you've got me. I know. Yeah, this chap wanted to be buried in pallets. He didn't want them to go and buy an expensive coffin. And he wanted to say he wanted them to say, "You fat bastard."
Like a chance.
Yeah.
You fat bastard. You fat bastard.
You fat bastard. You fat bastard.
Oh
when of course,
Was it a lot of pallets needed?
He didn't have the pallets, I'm afraid, but he did have a cheap coffin. And how I got round that was because obviously you have to be a little bit respectful that not everybody's going to find that funny. So when I got to that bit in the script, I said, I'm not sure if I've read this right. Well, it says, you cat basket. And of course, the ones that knew. And that sort of got round that little corner. But
well done. That's thinking on your feet.
You cat basket.
I like that.
Wow. Gosh, what an interesting thing to want to have said at a funeral. But I mean, why not? Whatever floats your boat.
I can imagine I'll have sweat art somewhere.
Right, darling.
Yeah. I've read something recently about living funerals.
Oh, I'm fascinated by this.
I wondered if you could tell us about that.
Well, yes. In fact, I've just done a living funeral at Hawksyard Hall Estate in Rugeley. And it was a really lovely event. It was for a lady who had recovered from cancer herself, and her husband has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. So it was really lovely working with them to create a ceremony that looked back on her life and a chance to really have an uplifting moment when they were together with all their friends. And we had a little video show, and he stood up to speak about her, and it was a really lovely opportunity for them to share a very, very special moment. And it was also televised or filmed for a documentary, which is in the pipeline. And I'm very hopeful that that's going to spread the word a little bit, because a living funeral, as they're called, can be really helpful to people in lots of ways. And you don't have to be dying to have one. You can be in the prime of your life and just take the opportunity to celebrate your achievements, be with your loved ones, and say things to each other that you wouldn't necessarily say at a party.
It's such an interesting thing to do, because when you think about it, as we get older, we only really see everybody we know and all our family members at what? Weddings and funerals.
Exactly.
And by the time that's happened, then the person that you might have wanted to see is dead. So,
Yeah.
What a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, even before I'd heard of them, I used to think, well, I'd like my funeral before I die. I want to know what people think and hear all the nice things they've got to say about me, because I kind of think it's a bit pointless after they've gone. I don't know about you, but I just think, I'm the sort of person that likes to say, nice things to people while they're alive, and this is a golden opportunity to do exactly that. And,
you have to keep us updated and let us know when the documentary comes out, because we can watch it and then we can give it a shout out.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So on a more personal level, Louise, what's the first thing that you think of when you think about death?
I mean, how should we mark it, I suppose? What can we do? For myself, being a celebrant, probably my first thing, it depends on the context really, but as a celebrant, my first thought is, how can we help people to cope with what is an enormous event in anybody's life, especially if they've been very close to that person? How can we turn this into a positive experience and take away some of the pain? And that's really what I live for as a celebrant.
And again, on a personal level, can you remember your first experience of losing somebody?
Well, my first experience was probably my grandparents, but I was pretty young then, so I didn't really take it in too much. But probably the most significant experience was losing my best friend from school when he was only 34, and he was HIV. And he was a really special person, and I still feel a lot of connection with him. And obviously you hear a lot of people say that grief never goes away, and I think that's probably true. It changes, but it never really goes away.
No, I totally agree with that. I think it finds its way out in the most unsuspecting moments.
Yeah, it's just little triggers, and I say that to my families when I meet them, because quite often they want to speak, say, at a funeral, which is great if they can, but I always warn them that the bravest, most experienced public speakers in the world will go to pieces or completely blank when they're in that situation, because you only have to see somebody's face, have a thought, just the slightest trigger can, reduce you to rubble. And, obviously that's a very difficult situation for them to be in, but also for the people attending the service, because there's not really a lot they can do to make them feel better. And of course, everybody becomes very upset. In that
like a chain reaction then, isn't
it? It is. So with that in mind, I always ask people to write down what they intend to say, even if they think they just want to speak off the cuff. Please write it down, because in the eventuality that you can't deliver it for whatever reason, it might be that you missed the bus, and I've had that before. But in that eventuality, I can step in to support them. Rather, there was a time when this chap was adamant he wasn't going to write it down, but I managed to squeeze out of him some bullet points. And because he got in there, and true to form, he dried up completely, couldn't speak, he was very, very emotional. So I was standing at the side going, tell him about the dog.
Like prompting him from the side, poking him.
Tell him about the market.
It's so nice that you can be like that. Do you think your own personal experience of loss, you saying like lost your friend and everything like that, do you think that's what prompted you to do the job that you do?
No, it was purely having seen funerals that I would come out of as a singer and thinking, I haven't got a clue who that was. It could have been anybody. So the idea of being able to really make a funeral reflect a person's life, and knowing personally how healing I would find that was what prompted me. And that's what spurred me on to keep doing it as well.
Louise, have you ever been in a situation when you're delivering, is that the right word, or presenting a funeral, and you yourself have felt, even if you've not known that person, but felt really moved by the circumstances in which they've died, or really moved by the family, and had to cope with your own feelings whilst being the person almost in charge of trying to deliver this service to other people?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question people often ask. They say, it must be a very difficult, sad job. I couldn't do your job. I'd get too emotional. But in truth, you're so focused on doing the best you can, making it as beautiful and as special and as wonderful as it can be for the family, that takes you out of your own emotional sort of reflection, if you like, because it just distances you. I mean, there have been occasions where you do suddenly connect and think and relate things to a personal experience. For myself, because I'm a singer, it will perhaps be when I'm singing a hymn or something, and the hymn reminds me of a time with my own family, my parents or something like that, or my dad singing, who was a fabulous singer, and that will trigger emotions. But I mean, I used to have similar sort of thing when I was a singer rather than being a celebrant, and when it did happen, I would, I'm just thinking of a funny moment, which I'll tell you in a moment, but when it did happen, I'd say, you're here to do a job, you're not here to be upset, and I'd give myself a talking to. But yeah, I was laughing because I was thinking of one where I was singing "We'll Meet Again," and the grandmother's the granddaughter stood up to talk about a grandmother, and she'd got this little poem, and she was only young, and it was really, really, really emotional, and I felt myself choking up. And I was quite young then, and I was supposed to stand up and sing "We'll Meet Again," and as I stood up, I suddenly started to think about the words I was singing. And they'll be happy to know, as you saw me go, I was singing this song. And I suddenly had this singing detective moment where I thought, is the coffin lid going to open? This gloved white hand going, la, 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 la. And I felt myself, forgive me saying, corpsing.
Yeah.
But I just put a fond expression on my face to mask it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was probably the only time I've nearly really ever almost fallen apart.
Yeah.
Louise, can I ask you, what do you think happens when we die?
I
I know you have to be respectful of all people's beliefs because of nature of your job, and you know. But have you got any particular beliefs yourself?
It is a difficult one because as a celebrant, it's not about our beliefs at all. But I was brought up a Catholic, and they say once a Catholic, always a Catholic. I'm not sure that is true in my case anyway, but I've got a spiritual side, I'd say, that believes in energies, but I think those energies are based on a practical level of the sort of energy that you leave in the world through your influences. And I'm not convinced that there's an afterlife, but I'm also of the camp that says, well, how can we possibly know? So I'd never say there wasn't, but I kind of don't think there is. Although I have had some strange experiences as a celebrant as I've gone along that have made me question that. So I'm really in a sort of
Sitting on the fence.
very much sitting on the fence.
Well, it's actually one of our
yeah.
next questions is have you ever had any experience of being with a spiritualist or a medium or somebody clairvoyant, anything that's ever sort of led you to believe there is something otherworldly?
Yeah, only myself.
Oh, okay. Well, do elaborate.
I'm coming to the conclusion that I might be, as my son calls it, a conduit. I used to think I was a portal, but he says I'm a conduit because he's an electrician. So, yeah, for a long time, when I first started being a celebrant, I was having very strong sort of images and almost narratives in my head from people that I'd done funerals for, and it became so bothersome that I spoke to a friend about it, and she said that I should go round with some white sage and burn it into the corner of the house and have some chanting going on as well, which I did. And one of the things she asked me before she suggested that was, she said, do your clothes feel damp? And strangely they did. My clothes felt really heavy and damp.
What was the connotation there? What was that?
Yeah.
She
about?
said that's the spirits coming, because she was very spiritual, but she said that's the spirits attaching themselves to you or something. I don't know, to be honest, but what I did notice was that stopped after the white sage.
After the sage.
Yeah, and then I've had some very... it was really the images of these people and the sort of the connection with them was so strong that it felt like I was being almost, sent mad by it, you know. I am mad, but not in that way. But
You're in good company.
yeah, but no, it was really noticeable, and it was all like it became quite a problem for me that I couldn't shake these
I would imagine
images.
it's quite intrusive, isn't it?
It was. That's the word, intrusive. And then there've been other occasions, like just recently, I was doing a funeral for this chap's wife, and one of the questions in the meeting was, did she like cooking? Because we were talking about how she was at home, and he said, no, she didn't. I did all the cooking. So I went home and wrote up the script and said, Nigella Lawson, she wasn't. And then I went on with saying that he did the cooking and they had got this lovely relationship. And then the next day I got a tribute from her niece who didn't know what I'd written, saying that they used to love watching Nigella Lawson together. And I've had quite a few moments like that where I'm thinking, where did that come from? It's so spooky. And sometimes the families have picked up on it themselves and said, how could you possibly know that? How did you know that? You know, and it would be suggesting a piece of music or something. It would be something that I couldn't possibly know, and something really random. So it has left me feeling quite. Ooh.
Could it be a learnt behaviour where you're just so used to meeting with people and having these conversations with people, or is it innate in you? And actually, it is.
My
gift
husband
in
would
some
say
way.
that. He's got no time for all this airy-fairy spiritual stuff. But no, I mean, there's another occasion actually, which I can't shake, was one day I was sat at my iPad and I was working away, and suddenly this script appeared that I hadn't searched for. And it was a lovely chap. I remembered him very, very well. And anyway, I got rid of the script, carried on working. And then next thing you know, I'm in bed. It's 3:00 in the morning. I woke up and I thought, I'll just check my phone. And there was this chap's name again on my phone. Oh, my God. Why has he come up again? Then I realised it was an email from his son telling me that his wife had died and they wanted me to do the service. And that has never left me. It was so unusual.
It's almost like a message before.
Yeah.
And it doesn't scare you, like getting messages or even having those feelings about people. It doesn't make you scared. You just sort of take it in and use it for, to make the best service you can. Or
well, no, I mean, it serves no purpose at all, which is, probably a little bit frustrating. If I could perhaps use it to help in some way, or but there is no advantage to knowing. And I wonder, and people have said, oh, you need to hone that, you need to go and see a medium and sort of develop it, but I'm not sure how useful it would be really. And unless I was able to say, well, I'll book off the 23rd because I know that Doris is going to die,
and get the lottery numbers while you're at it.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So if it was all to end tomorrow and it was your last day on earth, is there anything that you wish you could have done? Because you've done a lot of stuff and you sound like you live life to the full anyway. But if you had more time, is there anything that you'd really like to achieve?
Gosh, loads. Yeah, I need another 5 or 6 lifetimes at least. Yeah. There's lots of things I can't do now because I've flung myself about a bit.
Join the club.
You'd really interpret that in many ways, couldn't you?
Well, I'm talking physically, I have broken my back and my neck, and
Wow.
yeah, and had a nerve graft on my leg, and
So no extreme sports for you then? No.
not now. No, I was on water skis when I knackered my back. Yeah, but no, I'm not allowed to even jump up and down anymore. Although I do sometimes.
Yeah, you've got to have a little jump.
So there's no one single thing that you haven't done that you'd really like to do?
Just more travel, I
Yes.
think. And
It's a resounding answer, that,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
We hear it a lot.
yeah.
Do you have your own plans in place for your own death?
Well, interestingly enough, yes, I do. I always thought I'd probably go down the traditional cremation route, but I did a course with the Coffin Club. I don't know if you've come across the Coffin Club.
No, but
I've read about it.
To become a Celebrant Plus. And one of the things, well, they talk a lot about, how you can go about planning your own funeral, and what the laws are, the restrictions, and doing the course made me realise pretty much there aren't many restrictions.
Wow.
And that the funeral industry has created quite a sort of a sense that you have to do things a certain way, which suits most people, but there is a growing population of people who are choosing to do things differently. And one of the things that they talked a lot about at the beginning of the course was keeping your loved one at home, which I'm a great advocate for, because I do think in the West we have a tendency to whisk people away before people have got a chance to process the loss. I often think, how it would be if your husband died in the night. You've been married for 60 years and you wake up in the morning, oh my God, he's died. You phone up the funeral director and he's gone before breakfast, and how that must impact people's ability to process death.
And that's definitely our culture, isn't it? There are cultures where having an open casket at home is normal. But
in Indonesia, they keep the bodies for well over a year, partly because they're saving up for the funerals because it's a big affair, but they tend to their dead as though they're still alive. They take them food on, 3 meals a day, hug them, spend time with them, talk to them, and keep them in the house.
I had no idea, did you?
Did you not?
I did not know about that.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
The Irish typically would be, 3 days they would have an open coffin.
And there are some cultures, it's Philippines, where they exhume their bodies or bring them out of the mausoleums and wash them and dress them and dance with them, and spend time again with them, playing the music and, just still having that connection with their loved one. And this conversation, at first I thought, oh gosh, who would want to have their loved one at home? But the more I thought about it, the more, and it would have been done like that, In fact, in the north of England, my friend, he came from Saltburn, and it's his family tradition to have their loved one at home, and be with them, and the family come round, and it gives everybody a chance to give comfort, talk about them, and just accept death. So, although I'm not sure whether my boys and my husband are going to sort of sit round putting perfume on me and loving me in that way, I do think I would prefer to be at home and then have the most efficient direct cremation, and then have my family take.
When you say efficient and direct, can you expand on that?
Well, just it wouldn't matter to me where it is. For some people, it matters where they're cremated.
Okay.
Which actually strikes me as quite strange, because I see a crematorium as just a place, it's just a room, a functional place where a lot of people attach a spirituality to that space because their mother or their father have left the earth.
When you said efficient as well, I found myself thinking about the story you told earlier about the pallets, because I'm always amazed by the absolute vast expense of coffins.
Yeah.
And why are we doing that when we're literally putting them in a furnace is
exactly.
beyond me.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I would like a shroud. I think a shroud would be much nicer.
For our listeners that don't know what that is, can you explain?
Well, it's like a cloth, really, and there are some beautiful ones now that are done in applique, or you could decorate them yourselves, because you can't just take a body in the shroud. You do have to put them onto a carrying sort of platform. It's like, I suppose like a
large tray.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking more of what do they use in the war?
Oh, stretcher
type thing, yeah. And it's got to be obviously compatible with the laws and regulations for the crematoriums, what materials are used and that. But there are lots of ways, obviously, of transporting your body, as you probably know. Willow coffins now, wool coffins. I don't know if you've come across those. They're beautiful. They're very, very cosy, as you can imagine. Sort of like a woven wool, not knitted. And,
like a very large jumper.
Yeah, more of a sort of felt coat.
Yes.
Sort of, which I just think is lovely.
Yeah.
And of course, those are very ecologically friendly, and a lot of people are really preferring to have that sort of respect for the ecology. So yeah, I I would do that, and then I think I would like my friends and family, few as they are, just to gather round and share some stories, eat some nice food, and listen to my favourite music, and I shall leave a list.
Yeah.
I might actually leave them my own speech, because I do like to, know what's going
Could
to
you
be said
record
about.
it? You could
Could
pre-record
do,
it.
yeah. In fact, that's what they did at the Living Funeral.
Yeah.
Rona did a recording to leave, a little message, a parting message. But of course, if I was writing the tribute, there would be a few complaints in there, because I have to put a few complaints in whatever I'm doing. I'd like to complain about being dead.
First and foremost.
Yeah.
Not what I
I've got
wanted.
another 5 or 6 lives left. Lots of travel to do.
Finally, one last question for you. If you could find out when you were going to die, would you want to know?
Now that's a question that I often ask myself. And I think the answer is yes. I think I would.
That's fascinating. I think you're the first person we've interviewed that said yes.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Congratulations. I feel like we should have some
You
kind of
don't win
explosion.
anything, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why, because you'd be a bit stressed out thinking, oh, I haven't got time to do this.
A
and I haven't
week
got time to-"
Thursday?
Yeah. Oh, and I imagine the feeling is quite traumatic when you actually first realise that. But it's got to be preferable to, just suddenly going and not being able to tell people that you loved them, for them to be able to tell you, hopefully, that they loved you. And just put things in order. Like we've just recently filled out our will forms, but that's been bothering me. I'm thinking, oh gosh, any of us, as a celebrant,
we say this a lot, don't we?
you
get
can
your
go at any
affairs
time.
in order, yeah.
Yeah, you can go at any time. I mean, we all think we're invincible, don't we? But no, I think it'd be great to be able to have one last party. And in fact, I did a funeral for a young lady just recently. In fact, it wasn't very far from here. Have you heard of Alnwood?
Is that the natural burial? I've got. Well, that's where Nick.
Oh, is it? Oh.
Yeah, I just did a funeral there just very recently, and this young lady did have her living funeral. She was very, very poorly, but she also was in a hospice, and she was able to spend some really lovely time with her family and her little daughter as well, and she was able to leave her wishes for her funeral, which I think brought a lot of comfort to her family, because they weren't just feeling their way in the dark. And that is something that I would really encourage people to do. And then something that I offer is to actually sit down with people and talk through all the options that are available, that they can take somebody to the crematorium in their own car if they want, or on a tractor. They can have a funeral anywhere. It doesn't have to be in a crematorium.
Have you ever seen that done in their own car or a tractor?
Yeah.
Or have you?
Yes, yeah,
We've had
on the
people
back of a lorry.
pick them up from the mortuary in their own car.
Really?
Yeah.
And in fact, there's a funeral director that does that. They use a regular estate car in King's Heath, if you've not come across them.
No.
That's a natural undertaking, yes.
I know the company.
She's another
I do,
Carrie.
Yeah, she is.
And Francis, yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's so many choices that people are not aware of.
It's really interesting that we do think, don't we? Think, well, this is the set order of things, and then we must abide by that. And it's never even occurred to me that there are other
when you're in the
options.
state of grief, you do tend to get carried along, don't you? Because I remember when my mum died, I wanted a singer, and I knew lots of singers, but could I get my act together to phone one up? My brain fell out. So we do tend to just get swept along. So it's a really good idea to sit down and think about what you really want and what's out there as well, to learn about what the options are. And, just things like being able to keep your loved one at home. You don't have to send them to a funeral home. You could have them at home. And, there are ways of doing that, which a Celebrant Plus like myself can help you with, with advice. Or you could work in conjunction with your local funeral director, because a lot of them are now becoming much more open to the idea of doing things, to suit different needs. Which is how we came to be doing that lovely funeral at Alnwood. But yeah, even down to the caskets, where you hold it. I've done a funeral service in a pub, in back gardens. You can, in fact, you can bury your loved one in the back garden as well. There's no law prohibiting that. things to think about for sure.
I feel like this information should be really, really available to people. I feel like it's not.
Well, we need to do some more podcasts.
Yeah. Louise, thank you so much for being here with us today and having these really important and, for me, fascinating conversations. If our listeners want to contact you, if they want to find out about your services, could you tell them how to best get hold of you?
Yes, my telephone number is 07984 873 366 and my website is www.louisegood with an E on the end of good.net. So www.louisegood.net.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's been a
Been
pleasure.
a pleasure. Yeah, lovely to meet you.
It's been a pleasure to meet you too as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.